Welcome to Bunny Trails, a whimsical adventure of idioms and other turns of phrase. I'm Shauna Harrison.
And I'm Dan Pugh. Each week, we take an idiom or other turn of phrase and try to tell the story from its entry into the English language to how it's used today. Have you ever found yourself in a situation where things didn't quite follow the rules, but no one seemed to mind? Maybe it was a cash job with no paperwork, a quiet favor exchanged without a word, or a deal that was sealed with a nod instead of a contract. It wasn't illegal exactly, but it wasn't exactly out in the open either. It's the hidden economy, the whispered arrangement, the quiet corner of life where discretion takes the lead. And today, we're pulling back the curtain on the phrase, under the table.
Nice.
According to the Oxford English Dictionary, to do something under the table or under the counter means something was done, quote, in a clandestine or underhand way, secretly, illicitly, end quote.
Okay. I mean, yeah, that's pretty straightforward.
Yeah, it does. It does seem that way. Now, I will make a quick note. There is an older phrase to drink someone under the table, which is
nice.
it's when someone drinks alcohol to the point of insensibility, and is sometimes used to denote some sort of drinking contest, which we at Bunny Trails do not recommend. According to the Oxford English Dictionary, to drink under the table or drink someone under the table has been in use since at least the early 1600s, far longer than our phrases that we're going to talk about today. And we are not going to be talking about using alcohol to extreme effects. In this episode, we are sticking with the secret, illicit, or clandestine usage that does not have to do with ingesting booze. However, alcohol might be mentioned a couple of times.
Okay.
We're going to start with the first time I could find it in print. And this is an example from an opinion piece, a response to the editor, in the Montrose Standard and Angus and Mearns Register out of Angus, Scotland. This was published in the February 21st, 1902 edition, but the letter was written the day before. The phrase is used twice in the work and is clear from the entirety of the letter that under the table is being used to mean secretive and kept from the public. Here's the first usage. Quote, "Sir, the remarks of business in your last issue on Bailey Boyke's suggestion that a certain communication should be put under the table to the effect that communications, which offer no privilege except that of spending the rates on useless deputations, should be treated in this way, are evidently written in ignorance that such communications are not necessarily made to the public." End quote.
Huh.
So this is a long and wordy way of basically saying that Bailey doesn't want certain communications to be released publicly. He wants them to stay secret. And the person who is writing is saying that some things are already kept secret. They don't have to be made public. So he basically goes on to note that if Bailey is taking the trips to Edinburgh for the committee of the Convention of Burghs on his own dime, then Bailey has a right to keep his communications private. But if public dollars are being used, then the public has a right to know what the conversations are that are taking place. So that's basically the response letter that's there. And what this does for me is, because this was used in an opinion piece, then this makes it pretty clear that at least in this area, the phrase, which wasn't described in any way, it was just mentioned and left, means that this was at least used in the slang terminologies of the day in the very early 1900s. So there's every reason to suspect this is probably older than the early 1900s, but it's really hard to tell because it's a slang style term, and also something being under a table or under a counter is a thing that just gets referenced all by itself. So even if you were doing searches for something, you could see 100 uses of someone saying that something is under a table, that without ever running across a figurative usage.
Right. I was thinking about that. I'm like, just so many things.
Yeah, and I think this is why most of the stuff that I saw had this being attested first in like the 1920s and 1930s. But the more I drilled down and I looked at hundreds, hundreds of newspaper articles from the British Newspaper Archives and the Chronicling America Archives and the Newspaper Archives and just lots of different places that I could, get in and look at stuff. And it literally, it was usually 100 to 1 of the usage of the phrase under the table. One time out of 100, it was being used in some sort of figurative way. And not all of those were our secretive illicit. Some of those were the older alcohol-based one.
Right.
So, yeah, there was just, there
That's a lot to
very well
sift
could
through.
be more. All right, so up next is a passage in The Leader out of Melbourne, Australia, and it's dated August 1st, 1908. In it, the author is speaking of a deceptive practice of a medium, or one who claims to speak with the dead. He doesn't use the phrase in a figurative way in the article, but the connection to the literal usage and the figurative meaning is unmistakable. Quote, "The evidence of the average and honest intelligent observer is certainly of little weight. The slate writing business is usually done in the light, but as it is done under the table, that does not help the observer much," end quote. So the connection to the phrase is strong. He is using this in the literal being done under the table, but it has the same meaning as the figurative.
Right, like as it's hidden. That's it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So while this doesn't give evidence that he meant to use the term in the figurative way, it does give clear understanding of why the phrase could be taken to mean secretive or illicit.
Right.
Something done under the table is being done out of sight of any observers, and why go out of your way to do it under the table unless you want it to be secret? And in fact, the article even says as much a little bit later, where he continues, quote, "But why under the table? Why do spirits write under and not on the table?" End quote. So he's even making that point, like, why? Why would the spirits only write under the table? So it goes on. He's building up to revealing the sham by noting that the substance that is claimed to be chalk is actually mixed with iron filings, so it will be magnetic, and the fake medium is simply writing in reversed characters under the table to deceive the observers who are looking above the table. So here's another one. This is from an advert in the Evening Times Republican out of Iowa, USA, and it's dated June 16th, 1917. The advertisement is selling home lots in Benford Park Manor. And I'm going to read this here, and you're going to note two phrases that are being used here, and they're being used in the opposite to showcase, or to really like highlight the disparity between the two.
Right.
Quote, "Just 10 days, one price to all. No fluctuations in prices because the demand is great for our lots. Nothing under the table, all above board. Same prices and terms quoted to all," end quote. Yeah, so this is a great example because it uses the two opposite phrases. First, nothing under the table, meaning nothing being done in secret. And second, above the board, meaning without concealment or subterfuge. And to highlight the point, the statement, "nothing under the table, all above board," is in all caps, unlike the rest of the ad. And the phrase, "above board," which we may do in a future episode, has been in use since the mid to late 1500s, with the meaning of being open, free, and candid.
That was one that I kind of was like going, okay, above board. Like I use that phrase. I've heard it used a lot, but yeah.
Yeah, so it deserves an episode of its own, which we may do in a future time. So the usage of this phrase in the advertisement indicates the potential buyers would understand the term. So remember, I spoke about the 1902 usage and the person who is writing to the editor not defining the term, because it's likely in that area of Scotland, the folks reading the newspaper would have understood. Well, this one is out of Iowa, USA, with just 15 years after that. And this advertisement is also making the assumption that the people who would be buying these homes would understand the phrase. So this leads me to think it was a lot more common in slang vernacular in the early 1900s than I think the written records have indicated. Here's another example, this time with the under-the-counter version by Aldous Huxley in his 1926 work, Jesting Pilot, The Diary of a Journey. He's talking about the censorship of books due to the imposition of some people's beliefs on others. And it just feels like the more the U.S. changes, the more it stays the same. Because this is 1926.
I mean, Aldous Huxley was a genius, so,
Quote, in Philadelphia, the respectable booksellers do not stock Mr. Cable's Jurgen. In Boston, the Wrath and Ward Society suppresses the American Mercury. And in the same city, one at least of my own novels has to be sold under the counter as though it were whiskey. End quote.
As though it were whiskey.
Though it were whiskey, yeah. So this is around the time of Prohibition as well in the United States, where some people's beliefs decided that alcohol was not something that the average person should have access to. And so those laws changed. Not for a long time, though. They definitely got repealed at some point.
Right.
All right, back across the pond this time to London, England, and the Daily Express. And this is dated September 2nd, 1938. This is from an article titled Under the Table. Here's the opening paragraph. Quote, do you really think that is all the money a footballer can get? The Greek mythologists gave us the expression under the rose. Football gives us the expression under the table. I know hundreds of footballers. I know few who have not, at one time or another, taken something under the table. In other words, without official cognizance being taken of it. Everybody knows it is going on all the time and has been going on for years. End quote. He goes on to give examples of a player being transferred who doesn't want to be transferred, so they get a secret payment under the table to not publicly throw a fit about it.
Nice.
Or staff being given an unofficial severance package to keep them quiet when being fired or sacked for the Brits. Also, I should say I don't see any evidence of football or soccer for the Americans being the origin of this phrase, but it is possible the author was simply engaging in hyperbole here regarding this being the origin. But he does also mention under the rose, and that is quite an interesting phrase. You may be familiar with the Latin predecessor, sub rosa, and we're going to look more into this phrase in our behind-the-scenes video, which airs every Friday on our Patreon. That's patreon.com/bunnytrailspod. All right, here's one from the Evening Star out of Washington, D.C., USA. Though it is referencing shopping in England during World War II, this is dated January 9th, 1944, and the title of the article is Under-Counter Sales Make Shopping an Art in Wartime England. It is by Judy Barton and comes to the Star from London. Here's the opening paragraph. Quote, the post-war period will bring one certain relief to the harassed British housewife, the end of under-the-counter shopping, a present-day form of getting liver, kidneys, cosmetics, hairpins, matches, razor blades, and a host of other unrationed and hard-to-get articles. Unless you are friendly with the store clerk, they remain under the counter. End quote. Since the articles are not rationed, this isn't so much that they're illicit, as in unlawful or not permitted, as much as it is that they are clandestine or just done in secret. So I think that's a really interesting take on this one. Sometimes under the counter can mean it's illegal, right? But not always. Sometimes it's just that it's being done secretively, like in this case. Under the Counter is a musical comedy written by Arthur McRae and Harold Purcell, which premiered September 10th, 1945 at the Grand Theatre in Leeds, England, made its way to Broadway in the USA in 1947. It also ran on London's West End for 665 performances, and the plot focused on wartime rationing and the black market that was created around the shortages. I really tried to find a script of this. I wanted to read it, but I could not find anything anywhere for this. I found an old playbill from 1947 at a place here in the United States, and I was able to read through that and see who was acting in it, but I just couldn't find much about the play itself. And I wish I could have found that because I really wanted to be able to read about the musical and see some of the pieces in there. Although there were some songs listed in the playbill, obviously, so I could look up songs for it. But yeah, I just couldn't find the script. So maybe someone knows how to find the script for this under the counter from 1945. That would be awesome. I'd love to be able to read this. Here's one from the Louth Standard out of Lincolnshire, England. It's dated September 30th, 1960. It's from a short report titled Under the Table and seemed to indicate there was something odd about the phrase being used in an official legal case. Here's the first part of the brief exchange. Quote, cross-examined, P.C. Turner said that if Graces brought any cigarette to the back, they were given under the table. Questioned further about the cigarettes, which Bach maintained he had bought, P.C. Turner replied, there were no cigarettes passed over in view, end quote. Yeah, that's an interesting thing because there's nothing really all that interesting about it. So why did it end up in the newspaper? And I think it's because it was official legal transcript. So it's actually like happening in a legal case. So they just took this little snippet. There's about 2 more lines of it, and that's it, with no other background, right? So I have no idea what's going on here. But yeah, it was just it seemed interesting enough that the person who was putting this in the newspaper thought people would want to see it being used in this way.
It's almost like it was highlighting the just like letting it sit there so that you could see this. Turner replied, there was nothing passed over in view. And so it's almost like not saying they know that there weren't any exchanges, right, but that it didn't happen in full view,
Right. Like... Yeah. PC, by the way, is, I believe, in this case, police constable, which is a term in definitely the Met uses in London, but the police force there, because I know about it from the Rivers of London series.
Oh, okay.
By Ben Aronovich, which is a great series. I really enjoyed that.
Nice.
All right. Well, with that, it's time to move to our more modern usage. But first, we need to say thank you to our sponsors.
This episode is sponsored by our amazing patrons on Patreon. And the cool thing about Patreon is it is 100% free to join the community. We have new things every weekday on the feeds. On Mondays, we have a conversation about what movies, shows, books, podcasts, and whatever else everyone is enjoying. Tuesdays see early access to the week's podcast. Wednesdays have all the links, books, songs, and other content mentioned in the week's episode. Thursday has patrons-only polls, and Fridays are our lightly edited behind-the-scenes video featuring all the cut content, goofs, and bonus facts you could imagine.
We've got some other pretty cool stuff too, like original digital artwork once a month made by Shauna, and direct access to Talk With Us. No algorithms getting in the way of what we see or don't see. Plus, you can get awesome name recognition like Pat Rowe does every episode. And our top spot is currently occupied by the amazing Mary Halsig Lopez. You can join the Bunny Trails community for free at Bunny Trails Pod on Patreon.
That's patreon.com/bunnytrailspod.
This first one here in our modern usage is a memoir that captures the secret side of something. Under the Table, Saucy Tales from Culinary School by Katherine Darling. Here's the synopsis from the publisher. Quote, a legendary entertaining memoir about one woman's adventures in the student kitchens of the legendary French Culinary Institute, flavored with celebrity chefs, eccentric characters, and mouth-watering recipes. To anyone who has ever dreamed of life in a French kitchen, imagining days filled with puff pastry and sips of vintage wine, Katherine Darling serves up a savory dose of reality in this funny, fascinating, and altogether delightful account of her time spent slaving over a hot stove, wrestling with veal calves, and cleaning fish heads at the French Culinary Institute in downtown New York City. As she goes from clueless amateur to certified chef, Katherine and her quirky fellow students learn the secrets behind the art of French cooking, and frequently find themselves the objects of scorn and ridicule as their teachers wage psychological warfare over steaming pots of bisque. The kitchen, they soon discover, is no place for soft-hearted romantics. It's a cutthroat world, and no one ever made a souffle without breaking a few eggs or cracking a few heads together. From the basics to the final exam, Darlene reveals everything that goes into the making of a chef. Filled with delicious food lore and trivia, and including dozens of classic and original French recipes, Under the Table takes readers deep into the trenches of one of the world's most prestigious cooking schools and shows what really goes on behind the doors of every great restaurant kitchen. End quote. That sounds like a
Amazing.
great book.
It sounds really interesting. Like
Yeah,
super
I wonder if
fascinating.
there's an audiobook version of it, because this is exactly the kind of thing that I would listen to while like out on my run or while I'm like mowing the lawn or something. Like this is exactly the kind of thing I would do while doing some other sort of physical activity
Yeah.
that is frankly really boring, like running or something.
This is, it's just one of those things that I find interesting because, like every field or whatever, it has this like super elite thing, about it. So it's like you dancers is the whatever ballet company kind of thing. And all of them are like this cutthroat, intense, experience. And I'm like, I love that it exists in everything because I guess humans are mean to each other. I don't know. like,
It must be,
but it is fascinating to hear about it in all these different places. And this one also sounds entertaining. So
Well, this next one is blatantly about illicit items. Bribery and Corruption Casebook, The View from Under the Table, is edited by Joseph T. Wells and Laura Himes. Here's the synopsis from the publisher. Quote, real case studies on bribery and corruption written by expert fraud examiners. Bribery and Corruption Casebook, The View from Under the Table, is a one-of-a-kind collection of actual cases written by the fraud examiners who investigated them. These stories were hand-selected from hundreds of submissions, and together form a comprehensive, enlightening, and entertaining picture of the many types of bribery and corruption cases in varied industries throughout the world. Each case outlines how the bribe or corruption was engineered, how it was investigated, and how perpetrators were brought to justice. Written for fraud investigators, auditors, compliance officers, and corporate lawyers, and it reflects the recent crackdown on bribery and prosecution of cases under the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, FCPA. This book reveals the dangers of bribery and corruption and the measures that can be taken to prevent it from happening in the first place. End quote. That also sounds like it would be an entertaining read, but drastically in a different way. There's no world in which I could listen to the audiobook of this if there was such a thing. So this is the kind of thing that I would like set, in the evening when I don't have anything else to do and I'm all tired of screens and I'm just going to like flip through something. This is
Right.
exactly the kind of thing I would do that with. Or if I'm stuck in a hotel, something
Right,
like
yeah,
that for a
yeah.
little bit. Under the Table is a short film directed by Rory Gibson. This one sees the secret and sometimes illicit things in life and brings them out from under the metaphorical table to above the literal table. Here's the synopsis from the posting on YouTube. Quote, after the death of their father, an estranged family take their seats around the dining table and await the return of the lawyer to read the will. Stunted conversation soon turns pointed as the bitterness and resentment that forced them apart in the first place resurface. As the argument becomes more and more vicious, secrets and indiscretions come to light that threaten to ruin this family once and for all. Under the Table is a darkly comedic look at lies we tell ourselves to get by, the perfect versions of ourselves we try to portray, and how there's nothing like a trip home to the family to cut you back down to size. End quote.
Nice. I love it when it has a lot of little wordplay like in there.
Yeah.
It's good.
Yeah, this one definitely did in the synopsis. And I'll say it's like 15 minutes, so it's not very long, and we'll link to it on the YouTube so you can get to it on our show notes, or you can go to the website, buddytrailspod.com. Under the Table is a song by Fiona Apple, released in 2020 off the album Fetch the Bolt Cutters. It definitely catches the concepts of deception in the lyrics. Here's the second verse and into the chorus. Quote, I'd like to buy you a pair of pillow-soled hiking boots to help you with your climb, or rather to help the bodies that you step over along your route so they won't hurt like mine. Kick me under the table all you want. I won't shut up. I won't shut up. Kick me under the table all you want. I won't shut up. I won't shut up. End quote.
Wow.
Yeah, this one definitely captures that that pain in there of a relationship that is abusive in some form. I'm not sure if it's physical, a literal kicking under the table, or if it's emotional abuse or verbal abuse. So obviously it's bad in all cases, but
Right.
it definitely captures that concept of deception in the lyrics. Here's another one. It is an autobiographical work that involves secrets, deception, and illicit activity. The book is The Genius Under the Table: Growing Up Behind the Iron Curtain by Eugene Yelchin. Here's the synopsis from the publisher. Quote, drama, family secrets, and a KGB spy in his own kitchen. How will Yevgeny ever fulfill his parents' dream that he become a national hero when he doesn't even have his own room? He's not a star athlete or a legendary ballet dancer. In the tiny apartment he shares with his Baryshnikov-obsessed mother, poetry-loving father, continually outraged grandmother, and safely talented brother, all Yevgeny has is his little pencil, the underside of a massive table, and the doodles that could change everything. With equal amounts of charm and solemnity, award-winning author and artist Eugene Yelchin recounts in hilarious detail his childhood in Cold War Russia as a young boy, desperate to understand his place in his family. End quote. That sounds like it would be a really fun memoir to read. Under the Table is a song by Theo featuring Lebo. It was released in 2024. Here are the lyrics to the first verse. Quote, be careful, acting like we're strangers, but under the table, it's another story. Be careful. The damage that could happen if they noticed. And why can't you let this be? I'm holding myself back, but I need you so desperately. And I know that you do need me. So why don't we fight and just let them know that you've been on my mind, end quote. In this case, it's their love that's being kept secret, though I'm not sure the song really spells out why it needs to be kept a secret, although that may be part of the charm. And that's because the listener can apply the lyrics to their own situation much easier if it's not completely spelled out. This song is a great R&B style love song. I think Thomas Atkinson captures it brilliantly in his Industry Me article. Quote, Theo and Lebo are two artists you need to know, and you should start with their new collab, Under the Table. This duo fit together so well, with their voices flowing nicely from one to the other. The instrumental as well is top-notch, a relaxing experience emphasized by its use of bass guitar. The fact both artists produced the track together just highlights their musical capabilities. End quote.
I'm like all of your stuff today sounds really interesting, actually.
I really think that the secret and the intrigue and the things we don't know capture the imagination in a lot of ways. So it makes sense that things using under the table or under the counter might capture your imagination.
Yeah, I love it, and it's because it's like the broadly applicable, but it feels specific. you know.
Well, I'm not sure if we've ever done a future usage on our phrase in the show, but I suppose there's a first time for everything. Under the Counter is a game that will be coming to Steam. It's developed and published by Corbett Games, and here is their synopsis. Quote, Under the Counter is a narrative simulation in which you run a bar on a local market. Your task is to solve the mystery of missing people while serving food and moonshine to local fellows and demonic forces from a parallel world. End quote. It gets weird quick, huh?
Wow, that took a turn.
Yeah, so there's a trailer in the link on the Steam page for the game. And in this case, it seems the title comes from the under-the-counter elements of the business, which is moonshine, in an otherwise outwardly facing food stand selling soup and stew. So in case that was confusing, the stand sells soup and stew, but the under-the-counter elements are the moonshine that it also sells. It also hints at monsters, missing people, and a secret, dangerous underworld. The game is simply listed as coming soon on Steam as of the time of this recording. In an article on the announcement of the game by website Into Indie Games, they note, quote, this game loosely refers to the events of 1940 occupied Warsaw, drawing its main inspiration from the figure of Wikus the Sailor, an ex-sailor who arrived in Warsaw in the first months of World War II and started a food stall at the Rosiecki Bazaar. We know from our sources that he was liked and visited also by the soldiers who occupied the city. End quote. So it's definitely an interesting take on the game, and I can totally see where the under-the-counter element comes in with the selling alcohol, but kind of, illicitly
Right.
selling the alcohol.
Yeah. That sounds like it'd be an interesting game. It's got some common themes in games. It's like some of those are things that you see a lot, but also it's kind of got its own stuff going on there.
Right. Well, I must say, I really like the phrase under the table. The phrase paints a clear picture of something being slipped beneath a table out of sight from others. It can be used in a variety of contexts, from a side hustle to illicit goods. But it doesn't always tell us why something is hidden, which exposes the dangers of doing things under the table. And the phrase itself comes with a connotation of something that is against the rules. But for some, that's why the phrase makes so much sense. And it's part of the reason why I like it so much. That's about all we have for today. If you have any thoughts on the show or pop culture references we should have included, reach out to us on Patreon. That's patreon.com/bunnytrailspod, or comment on our website, bunnytrailspod.com.
It's poll time. Recently, we asked our patrons, if you could be a tree, what would you be? Conifers beat deciduous trees 57% to 43%. Mary said, quote, "There's nothing that makes me feel more refreshed than to get home, shed the work clothes, and put on my comfy home clothes. I think as a tree, I would love the chance to shake off the old leaves, bud out, and put on fresh green leaves. Flowers and fruit for my bees, and humans would be the icing on the cake." End quote.
So there's one vote for deciduous. All right, I like it.
JGP added, quote, "Conifer for me. Maybe a little prickly, but offering a nice protective spot year-round." End quote.
I love that idea as well.
Always with this, with this like straightforward.
Alan said, quote, "Deciduous for me, and I'd offer shade in the summer, and kids could climb in my branches and play in my leaves in the fall." End quote.
I like that.
Yeah, I like that. And Jan shared, quote, "Pine fresh scent for me," end quote. Well, I think personally, I am a deciduous tree. During the spring, I'm coming out of the funk and I get really excited. During the summer, I'm loving life and enjoying lots of water things. And during the fall, I'm still having fun, but I know winter is coming. And then in winter, I just try not to die. I get all bummed about everything, and I am frankly not a pretty sight. But then spring happens again, and I turn back into something cool and happy. So I think I am a deciduous tree, and I would love to be a conifer, something steady and pleasing all year long.
Nice. I love it. I don't know I don't know how to answer this one. I'm not a tree at all. I'm a climbing ivy or something.
All right, fair enough.
Well, as a reminder, our silly polls mean absolutely nothing and are not scientifically valid, and patrons of all levels, including our free tiers, can take part. Head over to patreon.com/bunnytrailspod to take this week's poll. Thanks for joining us. We'll talk to you again next week. Until then, remember,
Words belong to their users.